I never thought a late-night craving for warm milk would save my life. It was just past 2 a.m. I got out of bed, my feet brushing the cold hallway floor, heading toward the kitchen. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I froze when I heard my son-in-law's voice, hushed but clear. "She's slipping. The meds are working. Tomorrow, we'll have her committed, and then I'll deal with Rebecca. The money will be ours." Ours? The words hung in the air like poison. I stood perfectly still, heart pounding in my chest so loud I feared he'd hear it. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just listened until I heard the faint click of the call ending. My fingers gripped the cup of milk so tight, I thought it might crack. I backed away quietly and slipped into the guest room, shutting the door without a sound. I sat on the edge of the bed, trembling, not from fear, but from the shock. They were planning to lock me up. To call me unstable. All for money. And the worst part? I'd been feeling off lately. Not myself. Foggy-headed. Forgetful. I blamed age, stress, loneliness. But now I saw it. The pills. They weren't mine. They'd changed. I asked, and he told me it was a new brand. I trusted him. He was family. I felt sick. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat upright in bed, clutching that cooling mug like it was an anchor. Through the curtain, the streetlight flickered on and off. I stared at it, numb. The next room over, my daughter Rebecca slept peacefully next to the man plotting to destroy me. She had no idea. And that would change. They thought I was old, weak, confused. Easy to silence. Let them think that. Let them think they were winning. Because in that moment, sitting in a guest room that smelled like lavender and betrayal, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would not be erased. By morning, I wore a smile like armor. I poured the tea with a steady hand, or at least, I tried. The porcelain cup clinked against the saucer as my fingers betrayed me, shaking ever so slightly. Julian watched me from across the kitchen island. Not like a son-in-law. Not like family. Like a predator waiting to see if his trap had worked. He leaned against the fridge, all casual charm and fake concern. "You okay, Mama?" he asked, using the pet name he only pulled out when he wanted something. "I'm fine, thank you," I replied, folding the cloth napkin in front of me with deliberate care. "Just didn't sleep well." He nodded slowly, eyes scanning my face, as if searching for cracks. I gave him none. Then Rebecca entered the room, her hair still damp from the shower, her cheeks glowing in the soft morning light. "Morning, Mama," she said, kissing my forehead. "Did you sleep okay?" I nodded, smiling again, too brightly. "Of course, sweetheart. Just a little headache." She barely noticed. She was already checking her phone, already thinking about her meeting at work, the kids' school schedule, dinner plans. If only she knew. But how could she? She trusted him. She'd married him, built a life around him. The same man who had whispered about having her mother committed like it was a business transaction. He had manipulated her too. That much I could see now. Still, I said nothing. "Not yet. Don't forget we have that dinner with Carolina's family this weekend," Rebecca said as she slipped on her blazer. "Oh, yes," Julian added with a grin. "Can't wait." His smile was all teeth. I stood and placed my empty cup in the sink, steadying myself against the counter as I did. My legs still felt weak from the night's revelation. My head was buzzing with questions. Plans. Contingencies. But I couldn't let it show. Rebecca kissed my cheek again and hurried out the door. Julian lingered. "You know," he said, his voice lower now, "you really should consider cutting back on some of your activities. It's a lot to keep up with, at your age." There it was. A seed. Planted. I turned to face him fully. "I appreciate your concern, Julian," I said calmly, meeting his gaze. "But I still know how to take care of myself." For a moment, we stood there, just the two of us. His face didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Doubt? Or irritation that I hadn't cracked? Either way, I held his stare until he gave a fake chuckle and walked away. When I was alone, I allowed myself to exhale. They thought they had the upper hand. But I was still here. Still lucid. And now I knew what they were capable of. They wanted a battle? Fine. I had just begun to sharpen my weapons. I couldn't stop thinking about the pills. After Rebecca left for work and Julian disappeared into his home office, I went back to the guest room and shut the door behind me. Quietly, like I was hiding in my own daughter's house. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened the small case where I kept my medications, and stared at the bottles. At first glance, nothing seemed wrong. The labels looked official. My name was printed neatly, the dosage clear. But the pills inside, the color wasn't right. The shape was slightly different from the ones I remembered. I picked one up and held it to the light. It was chalky, coated, faintly bitter in smell, not the gentle amber capsules my doctor had prescribed for memory and sleep. I had noticed the change a few weeks ago. Julian had said something about the pharmacy switching manufacturers. I'd believed him, because why wouldn't I? He was the one picking them up for me. He said he was trying to help, to make things easier. But now, every favor he'd done tasted sour in my mouth. And come to think of it, I had been groggier lately, more forgetful, unsteady on my feet. I blamed age, poor sleep, hormones, stress. I'd even laughed about it with Rebecca one night. My brain's like Swiss cheese these days. And Julian had smiled, too quickly, too easily. That's why I help with the meds, Mama. Can't have you forgetting those. I sat there now, cold and still, realizing the quiet horror of it. This man had been drugging me. Little by little, shifting the ground under my feet until I started doubting my own balance. And no one had noticed, because I hadn't let them. Because I was too proud. Too trusting. I pulled out an older bottle I'd tucked away by accident when packing. It still had a few of the original pills from Dr. Patel. I laid them side by side with the new ones. Different, clearly different. He was banking on the idea that I wouldn't notice. That I wouldn't remember. That no one would believe me if I did. A chill went through me as I put the bottles back. I tucked the older one into a small fabric pouch I kept in my purse. My fingers brushed the side of it, embroidered flowers my mother had sewn in when I was a child. A lucky pouch, she used to call it. I hadn't thought about that in years. But I would carry it now. I needed luck and proof. Because something inside me had shifted since that night in the hallway. I wasn't just a mother-in-law, a guest, an old woman drifting quietly through her final chapter. No, I was a witness, a target, and now I would become a player. And I always did better when people underestimated me. 3 days later, I made up an excuse to get out of the house. I'm going to visit Myra, I told Rebecca casually over breakfast. She's been asking me to stop by. I'll just take a cab. Julian was buttering toast, his smile tight. That's a long ride, Mama. Want me to drive you? I looked him straight in the eye. No, I'm fine. I need the fresh air. He didn't push, but I saw it, that flicker of suspicion behind his eyes. He was watching me more closely now, like I was a ticking clock. When I got to Myra's house, it felt like stepping back into sanity. Her cozy living room smelled like old books and cinnamon candles. She still had the same crocheted blankets over the sofa, the same porcelain teapot from her nursing days. Myra and I had been friends for nearly 30 years. Widows, survivors. She had worked as a nurse for most of her life and knew more about medications than half the doctors I'd met. When I pulled the pill bottles out of my bag and placed them gently on her coffee table, she raised an eyebrow. I need you to tell me if these are what I think they are, I whispered. She didn't ask questions, not yet. Just picked them up, examined the labels, then the pills themselves. Her hands were steady, precise. Years of experience in every movement. These aren't your memory meds, she said after a long pause. They're sedatives. Heavy ones. She looked at me then, hard. Where did you get these? My son-in-law's been filling my prescriptions, I said quietly. At least, that's what I thought. Myra's mouth tightened. She set the bottles down with a soft thud. These aren't just sleep aids, sweetheart. This dose would have you foggy, unstable, disoriented. Taken regularly, they could mimic signs of dementia. Confusion. Mood swings. A chill passed through me. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to have confirmation. I thought I was losing my mind, I said, staring down at the tea in my lap. No, darling. Someone wants you to think that, Myra said, reaching for my hand. And then, softly, you need to protect yourself. I nodded, not trusting my voice. For years, I'd been the one offering help. The one holding hands, writing checks, remembering everyone's birthdays. Now, I was the one being watched like prey. But Myra's words cracked something open in me. A window. A path. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't sick. I was being drugged, gaslighted, silenced. But not for long. I took the pill bottles, thanked Myra, and walked out with my shoulders just a little straighter. Because in that moment, I realized something simple and powerful. If he was planning something this vile, it meant he was afraid of me. And that gave me hope. The next morning, I sat with Rebecca on the porch, watching the light shift across the garden she rarely had time to enjoy. She had her coffee. I had tea. The silence between us wasn't awkward, just full of things unsaid. I chose my moment carefully. Do you remember the pills Dr. Patel prescribed me last year? The ones I started for memory and sleep? Rebecca nodded without looking up. Yeah, I remember. You said they were helping. They were, I replied. But I think they changed. Lately they feel different. Do you know if Julian has been picking up the same ones? She blinked, finally turning to face me. Wait, I thought you were still on the same meds Dr. Patel gave you. I haven't looked at the bottles. He said he handled your refills. He did, I said. That's what I thought too. Rebecca frowned, the kind of frown you get when a puzzle piece doesn't quite fit. Why would he switch them? She murmured, mostly to herself. I gave a small shrug, careful not to push too hard. Maybe it's nothing. Just been feeling a little off lately. She reached over and squeezed my hand. I'll check with the pharmacy, okay? See what they've been giving you. I nodded, my expression soft. Grateful. But inside, I was already sure of the answer. She didn't know. That mattered. Because if Julian was doing this alone, if Rebecca wasn't part of it, there was still something worth saving. Still someone I could protect. I studied her face in the morning light. She looked tired, stressed. That little line between her brows had deepened over the past year. It used to only show up during exams in college. Now it lived there. She was so busy trying to be everything, wife, mother, professional, that she didn't see the danger sleeping in her bed every night. She trusted Julian to take care of things. That's how he'd slipped in. Like a shadow. I looked out over the yard, letting the moment breathe. There was no need to rush. Not yet. The truth was a powerful thing, but it had to be handled right. If I came out swinging, I'd lose her. She'd think I was paranoid. Sick. Just like he wanted. No. I had to be careful. Calculated. I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. Patterns. Evidence that couldn't be explained away. And until I had it, I would play the game. Pretend to forget. Act a little slow. Let him believe he was winning. Because while they sat there, thinking I was fading into the background, I was actually sharpening my mind. And learning who I could trust. Rebecca squeezed my hand again. You know you can talk to me about anything, right? I smiled, touched her cheek gently. I know, sweetheart. And I will. Soon. A week later, I walked into the downtown office of Mr. Harvey Lerner, elder law attorney. The building was quiet, elegant, wood-paneled walls, framed photos of community awards, and the kind of calm that comes from someone who's seen the worst in people but never forgot how to listen. He greeted me with a firm handshake. Mrs. Calderon, I remember you. You and your husband came here for your living trust a few years back. I nodded, clutching my purse tighter. Yes, but this visit is different. He led me into his office, and I told him everything. Not all at once. I started with the pills. The changes. The whisper I'd overheard in the hallway at 2 a.m. and how I hadn't told Rebecca, not yet, because I wasn't sure what I was dealing with. Mr. Lerner listened without interrupting. Just took notes with a silver pen, nodding occasionally. When I finally finished, he sat back, steepling his fingers. This is more common than you'd think, he said quietly. Elder financial exploitation often starts like this, slow, subtle. The wrong pills, a missing document, a helpful relative taking over errands. He sighed. But in your case, it's already escalated. If he's switching prescriptions, trying to make you appear unstable, that's not just unethical. It's criminal. The room felt very still. I want to protect what's mine, I said finally. And I want to do it without causing a war in my family. Mr. Lerner gave a small, sad smile. Unfortunately, you're already in one. You just didn't declare it yet. He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. Here's what I recommend. First, we quietly revoke any financial access you may have granted. Bank accounts, health proxies, anything he could use to make decisions on your behalf. Then we document everything, medications, statements, incidents. And we get your physician involved. If he can confirm the drug changes, we'll have grounds to report this as abuse. And Rebecca? I asked softly. She may be a victim here too, he said. But until we know for sure, you protect yourself first. Then you bring in allies. I nodded, feeling a little steadier. We went over the paperwork, and he answered every question without rushing. When I left his office an hour later, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a woman with a plan. On the way home, I stopped at a small cafe and sipped tea alone by the window. I watched people rushing past, young, old, tired, in love. None of them knew that just 2 blocks away, a grandmother was preparing for legal battle. But I knew, and in that quiet moment, I made myself a promise. If Julian wanted to turn this into a game of control, fine. But I'd been underestimated before. And that's always been my greatest strength. When I got home, I went straight to the bathroom and flushed the pills. Not the old ones, the new ones. The ones Julian had been giving me. I did it slowly, watching each tablet swirl away like poison being pulled from a wound. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt focused, clear, like I was finally cutting a wire before it exploded. That night, I didn't take anything. Just closed the door, locked it from the inside, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel drugged. My mind wasn't foggy. I didn't forget what day it was. I didn't forget my name or why I'd walked into a room. That was all the confirmation I needed. So the next morning, I began writing everything down. I started with the phone call I overheard that night, the exact words, the time, where I stood. Then I listed each time Julian had handed me a pill. Each time I'd felt groggy. Each suspicious look. Every offhand comment about how forgetful I'd become. I wrote about the pills. About Myra. About Mr. Lerner. I kept the notebook hidden in the back of my closet, inside an old shoebox beneath a stack of winter scarves no one ever touched. It was navy blue with a leather strap, one I'd been gifted years ago and never used until now. My war journal. Each evening, when I closed the door to my room, I added a new entry. Some were short. Some were just dates and what Julian had said at dinner. Some were entire paragraphs of memory, anger, clarity. I didn't tell Rebecca. I still wasn't ready. She was gentle with me, kind. But distant, distracted. She was trying to juggle her own chaos and still believed the man beside her was honest. So I said nothing. Instead, I watched. Julian, for his part, seemed unsure of what was happening. He still brought me tea occasionally, still asked if I'd taken my meds, but now he looked at me differently, like he was waiting for me to stumble. Waiting for a sign that his plan was working. But I didn't stumble. And I didn't argue. I said thank you. I smiled. I flushed the pills and wrote it all down. I was becoming sharper, more alert, and he was noticing. One night, he hovered outside my door a little longer than usual. I heard the floor creak. Then silence. He knew something had changed. But he couldn't prove it. Because I wasn't reacting, I was preparing. People like Julian expect one of two things from women like me, silence or collapse. They don't expect strategy. They don't expect restraint. They don't expect us to fight back with facts instead of fists. But I was doing exactly that. Quietly, carefully, one flushed pill at a time. A week passed. I kept up the act. Sleepy smiles, short nods, the occasional, "I can't remember," murmured at breakfast. But behind the performance, my mind was sharpening like a knife on stone. And then, one morning, it happened. I walked into the kitchen just as Julian was cleaning up a spill on the counter. The smell hit me first, bitter, burnt, unmistakable. Coffee. And then I saw it. My journal. Soaked, warped, ruined, its pages spread out across the kitchen table, bleeding blue ink into brown puddles. The leather cover curled like a dying leaf. "Oh no," Julian said with a grimace. I was reaching for the sugar and it slipped. "I'm so sorry, Mama." He picked it up carefully, dabbing at it with a dish towel like a man who'd just stepped on a dog's tail. I stood there frozen. And then, I smiled. "Don't worry about it," I said softly. "It was just an old notebook." He blinked, probably expecting anger. Maybe a breakdown. Instead, I walked over, took the soggy mess from his hands, and placed it calmly in the trash. Because I already knew. He'd found it. He'd read it. And he'd tried to erase it. But what he didn't know, what he never thought to consider, was that I'd already typed every word into an email. An email addressed to myself. With time-stamped entries, backup files, and a copy forwarded to Mr. Lerner. Every night, after writing by hand, I'd quietly transcribed it onto my tablet. Old habits die hard, and I never liked putting all my trust in paper. So while he was standing there smug, thinking he'd silenced me, I was 10 steps ahead. Still, I didn't let it show. I tossed the ruined journal, rinsed my hands, and started making breakfast. "Accidents happen," I said lightly, cracking eggs into a pan. He smiled, relieved. But there was something else behind his eyes now. Suspicion. He'd expected me to break. To accuse him. To panic. Instead, I'd moved on like nothing had happened. And that unsettled him more than a screaming match ever could. He left the kitchen quickly, muttering something about a call. I flipped the eggs, humming. Let him wonder. Let him worry. Because now I had proof of his sabotage. Not just in words, but in actions. He had destroyed private property. Read personal documents. Tried to erase my truth. And all he'd accomplished was giving me another entry for my case. Another line of evidence. Another push toward justice. He thought he was tightening the leash. But all he'd done was loosen mine. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. The house was unusually quiet. Rebecca had taken the kids to their music lessons, and Julian assumed I was napping. I wasn't. I came into the dining room just in time to see him hunched over my documents, pen in hand, shoulders tense. He didn't hear me at first. Not until I cleared my throat. He jumped like I'd hit him with a bucket of ice. "Oh, hey, Mama," he stammered, spinning toward me too fast. "Didn't hear you there." He tried to block the paper with his arm. Too late. It was a bank form. One of mine. The kind that needed a signature to authorize access. And the signature, well, it was almost good. But it wasn't mine. I looked down at it slowly, then up at him. And I smiled. "Do you need help with something, dear?" I asked, voice honey sweet. He blinked. Once. Twice. Then laughed. "Just helping Rebecca sort through your stuff. She asked me to look over some things." I stepped closer, hands resting on the back of the chair. "Well, you know I like to double-check things before anyone signs on my behalf." He said nothing. The form remained face down on the table, the pen still warm in his hand. I let the silence sit there between us. Heavy, accusing, calm. "Anyway," I said at last, as if we were talking about the weather, "you might want to shred that copy. It's not quite accurate." And with that, I walked away. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just smiled as I went into the kitchen, pulled out my tablet, and typed a new entry into the digital journal, September 14th. Witnessed Julian attempting to forge my signature on a financial document. Location. Dining room. Approximately 2:40 p.m. Did not confront. Recorded mental note of handwriting, form content. Then, I forwarded the entry to Mr. Lerner with the subject line, "Update." It wasn't a major victory. No arrests. No confessions. But it was a shift. A moment where he knew I knew. A moment where he realized the old woman with shaky hands and soft smiles wasn't quite so harmless. Later that evening, he was unusually quiet at dinner. Rebecca chatted about PTA meetings and a coworker's birthday, unaware of the chill radiating from across the table. I passed the salad bowl to Julian. He didn't look me in the eye. Small wins are still wins. And with each one, I was taking back a piece of the ground he thought he'd stolen. 3 days later, I made my quietest move yet. It arrived in a plain box from a small tech company online, a discreet clock with a hidden camera built inside. Motion activated, audio enabled, synced to a private cloud I could access from anywhere. I placed it on my bedroom dresser like any other decor. A simple black frame, digital numbers, nothing suspicious. But from now on, it would see everything. That night, I pretended to go to bed early. Left the light dim, door ajar, television humming low with an old detective show. Then I slipped downstairs quietly and waited in the laundry room, my heart thudding like a drum in my ears. It didn't take long. 37 minutes after the house had gone quiet, I heard the creak on the upstairs landing. Steps. Soft. Measured. Then, the unmistakable sound of my bedroom door opening. He thought I was asleep. I didn't dare breathe. I stayed in the laundry room for what felt like an hour, my phone clenched in my hand, eyes glued to the app. Watching the footage stream live. There he was. Julian. In my room. He rummaged through my dresser drawers. Opened my closet. Pulled out the same scarf box where I'd once kept the original journal. He checked under my bed. Inside my side table. Even opened the closet where my suitcases were stored. He was looking for something. He didn't find it, because I'd already moved everything to the guest bathroom, hidden in a waterproof bag beneath the false bottom of the cleaning supply bin. He left after 8 minutes. Didn't touch anything obvious, but the invasion was enough. I had him, on camera, in my private room, uninvited, without reason. The next morning, I downloaded the footage, copied it onto a USB stick, and slid it into an envelope marked simply, Harvey. Then I resumed my routine. Poured my tea, smiled at Rebecca, listened to Julian explain how he had to run to the bank for some errands. He had no idea, but I noticed something new in his eyes that morning. He was unsettled. He could feel something shifting. The way prey senses a change in the air. Because I hadn't broken. I hadn't faded away. I hadn't called a family meeting and wailed accusations like he'd expected. No, I was quiet, and quiet made him nervous. I looked out the window, watching the birds pick at the feeder. Let him squirm, let him sweat, because now I had eyes where he thought I was blind, and ears where he thought I was deaf. And while he was looking over his shoulder, wondering what I knew, I was building the case that would finally make him answer for it all. I invited Rebecca to lunch. Just her and me. No children. No Julian. I told her I needed to talk, really talk. And maybe for the first time in months, she heard the weight in my voice. We met at a little cafe downtown, the one she loved when she was in college. She used to come here with her study books and bright dreams. Now she walked in with tired eyes and a tense smile. "Mama, you okay?" she asked as we sat down. "You sounded serious." I didn't answer right away. I placed my phone on the table between us and opened the folder marked private. Before I say anything, I told her gently, "I need you to see something." I played the video, the footage from the hidden camera. Julian, entering my room. Rummaging through my drawers. Searching my things like a thief in his own home. Rebecca froze. She leaned closer, hand covering her mouth as the video continued. When it ended, I waited. Let the silence fill the space. Then I pulled out the printed emails, the journal entries I'd copied, time-stamped, dated. I laid them out, one by one. The forged bank form, the pill switch, the night I heard him plotting in the hallway. Finally, I set down a small bottle. Myra, remember her? She used to be a nurse. She tested those pills. They weren't what Dr. Patel prescribed. Julian has been giving me sedatives. Rebecca's hands shook as she picked up the bottle. She read the label like it would explain everything, fix everything. "Mama," she whispered, eyes brimming. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I didn't know what you believed. I didn't want to lose you. But I can't stay silent anymore." She blinked, a single tear slipping down her cheek. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "I believe you," I said softly. She reached across the table and grabbed my hands with both of hers. Her grip was tight, desperate, and suddenly, she wasn't just my daughter, she was a woman who'd realized the life she built was resting on a lie. "I want to confront him," she said, voice shaking. "Not yet," I replied. "This has to be done the right way. No yelling, no drama, legal, documented, permanent." She nodded, swallowing hard. "What do we do?" I smiled, not out of joy, but relief. Because for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was fighting alone. "We let Mr. Lerner guide us," I said. "And we move fast." Rebecca wiped her eyes, then took a deep breath. "We'll get him, Mama." "No," I corrected her gently, "we'll protect ourselves." And right there, in that cafe filled with old music and burnt coffee, something changed. Not just in her. In me. I wasn't hiding anymore. Now, I was preparing for war, with an army of two. 3 days later, we were sitting in Mr. Lerner's office, side by side, mother and daughter, calm and ready. He looked over the footage, the journal entries, the forged forms, the emails. He listened without interruption. When we finished, he exhaled through his nose, slow and heavy. "You've got more than enough to act," he said. "Now we do it by the book." The plan came together in less than an hour. First, we submitted an official elder abuse report to Adult Protective Services, complete with documentation, photos, timestamps, medical notes from Dr. Patel, and the confirmation from Myra about the sedatives. Then came the restraining groundwork, a petition for a temporary protective order should Julian try to retaliate. And finally, the key move. We scheduled a psychiatric evaluation with my real doctor, Drive Patel himself. Not some shady referral Julian had set up, just to make sure I was okay. Dr. Patel was thorough, kind, and furious. "You're sharp as ever, Mrs. Calderon," he said after a full exam. "There's no medical reason anyone should question your mental competency." Exactly what we needed. Mr. Lerner set the appointment one day before the date we knew Julian had picked for his intervention. Because yes, he was planning something. Rebecca had found the clue on his tablet, a calendar entry labeled Family Intervention, with a reminder set for noon on Saturday. I almost laughed when I saw it. He thought he was being clever. He had no idea we'd already replaced the battlefield. The night before, I packed a small overnight bag and kept it in my closet. Not because I was running, but because I knew from now on, I wouldn't be staying in any house where I wasn't respected. Rebecca helped install an extra camera in the living room. Just in case. We changed the locks on my room. We backed up every file, every image, every medical record. And most importantly, we waited. On Friday night, I looked at myself in the mirror. Same eyes, same silver streak in my hair. Same hands that had raised a daughter, buried a husband, built a life. But now they were fists. Not of rage, but readiness. Rebecca knocked on my door that evening. She had tears in her eyes but steel in her voice. "You were right," she said. "And I'm sorry it took me so long." I smiled and opened my arms. "You're here now. That's what matters." She hugged me tightly, not out of guilt, out of trust. And somewhere in that embrace, I felt it, the trap was set. We weren't running. We were waiting. Let him bring his fake social workers. Let him call his witnesses. Because this time, real professionals would be there. Real doctors, real lawyers, real justice. And this time, I wouldn't be alone when he tried to take everything. It happened exactly as we expected. Saturday, just before noon, Rebecca and I sat quietly in the living room. I wore my soft gray sweater and kept a light blanket over my knees. A warm mug in hand, though I didn't sip. Rebecca scrolled her phone, calm as still water. The doorbell rang at 11:56 a.m. Julian appeared in the hallway, clearing his throat. "Mama, could you come to the living room? Some professionals are here to talk, just a quick mental health check." He smiled like a man who'd already won. I nodded and set my mug down gently. Two strangers entered, a man and a woman. Not in uniform, not in scrubs. No credentials offered. They stood tall, eyes scanning the room. The woman clutched a clipboard. The man kept his hands in his jacket pockets. "We're with the community wellness team," the woman said. "We've been told there's concern over your recent behavior, Mrs. Calderon." I opened my mouth to respond, but then, a knock at the door. 3 knocks. Then the sound of a key turning. Rebecca stood and opened it calmly. "Right on time," she said. In walked Dr. Patel. Behind him, 2 uniformed officers. And a woman with a legal pad and a badge. "Adult Protective Services," she announced. "We received a credible report of elder abuse. This is a formal investigation." The room froze. Julian's face drained of color. His hands curled into nervous fists. The fake social workers looked like someone had dropped ice down their backs. The male officer turned to them. "IDs, please." The woman hesitated. "We're just volunteers, we were told." "IDs," the officer repeated. They had none. Dr. Patel stepped forward, his voice calm but unyielding. "I evaluated Mrs. Calderon yesterday. She is mentally competent, fully lucid, and her medications have been tampered with. There is no medical basis for any psychiatric hold." The APS investigator pulled out a folder and laid it on the table. "In this file," she said, "we have digital evidence of unauthorized medication changes, attempted financial fraud, and illegal surveillance. You've also been recorded entering her private bedroom without consent." Julian stammered, "This is ridiculous, she's confused, she's been unstable." Rebecca stepped forward then. "No, Julian. She's been sane. You're the one who's been deceitful." He looked at her like she'd slapped him. "You're really taking her side?" "I'm taking the side of the truth," she said, voice steady. The officers didn't need to say another word. They asked Julian to step outside. He refused at first, still sputtering, still trying to control the narrative. But control was gone. The uniformed officer stepped forward, one hand resting lightly on his belt. "You need to come with us, sir." And just like that, he was out of the house. Rebecca sank onto the couch beside me, her body trembling, her hands shaking. I reached for her, calm as ever. Because this wasn't chaos. This was justice, quiet, slow, and undeniable. They let me say something before he left. Julian stood by the front door, flanked by the 2 officers. His hands were clenched. His face was twisted in disbelief, like a boy caught with a hand in the jar, still insisting it was someone else's. "Would you like to speak, ma'am?" one officer asked me gently. I nodded and stood. My knees didn't wobble. My voice didn't tremble. I stepped forward and looked Julian in the eye. Not the man he pretended to be. The man he really was. "You tried to erase me," I said calmly. "Not just my mind, but my name. My rights. My worth." He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "You drugged me, falsified my prescriptions, spied on me, tried to take what I spent a lifetime earning." He shook his head, scoffing. "You're paranoid," he muttered. "Sick. None of this makes sense. Rebecca's been feeding you lies." And that's when she stepped beside me. "No, Julian," Rebecca said, her voice low but clear. "I've been waking up." He looked at her like he didn't recognize her. Like she'd betrayed him. But the only betrayal in the room was his. Rebecca held up her phone. "These are the messages you sent me. Pushing for me to get power of attorney. Saying Mom was slipping fast. Telling me not to worry, that you'd handle it." She turned the screen to the officer, who gave it a glance, then a nod. Julian's mask slipped. His smile cracked. He took one last shot. "She's old. She's confused. She's manipulating you. This is what they do when they start losing it." I stepped even closer. "I may be old," I said, "but I've raised a child, buried a husband, survived grief and war, and rebuilt myself more times than you've even changed phone numbers." Don't mistake age for weakness. He didn't respond. The officers thanked us for our cooperation, gave us a business card with a case number, and escorted him out the front door. The silence that followed was deep. Not peaceful, but clean. The kind of silence that comes after a storm, when the air still smells like rain and something heavy has finally been lifted. Rebecca turned to me, tears gathering but not falling. I can't believe it got this far. I touched her cheek. It's not your fault. We trust people we love. That's not weakness. That's human. She hugged me, and this time the embrace wasn't stiff or distracted. It was the kind of hug a daughter gives when she realizes her mother has been fighting alone in the dark, and won. I closed my eyes for just a moment. Not in grief, not in fatigue, but in gratitude, because for once, someone like him wouldn't get away with it. Not this time. The emergency hearing was held 2 days later. I wore my best navy coat, the one with the silver buttons. Myra always said it made me look dangerously sharp. I didn't disagree. The courtroom was plain but tense. Julian sat across the aisle, flanked by his lawyer, young, smug, and clearly not expecting what was coming. Mr. Lerner greeted us with quiet confidence. He'd already prepared our packet: video evidence, journal entries, pharmacy reports, a sworn statement from Dr. Patel, and those fake wellness workers who'd conveniently disappeared. When the judge entered, Julian straightened his tie. It would be the last thing he controlled that day. Mr. Lerner started with the facts. The prescription tampering, the financial forgery, the attempted involuntary intervention, the silent manipulation behind closed doors. Then came the footage. The room went still as the hidden camera video played. Julian, in my bedroom, rifling through my belongings like a man casing a stranger's house. The judge leaned forward, eyebrows drawn tight. Then came the text messages. Rebecca's phone laid it all bare. Convince her to sign the POA form. I'll handle the rest. She won't even notice if the meds keep doing their job. The courtroom buzzed. His lawyer tried to object. The judge shut it down. And then came my doctor's testimony. She is fully mentally competent, Dr. Patel said firmly. There is no basis for psychiatric concern. The medications given to her were sedatives, prescribed by no known physician and filled under suspicious authorization. Julian's lawyer tried to shift blame. She's old, misremembering. There's no proof he intended harm. That's when Rebecca stood. She held up a printed bank document, one that showed Julian had requested access to my accounts days before the intervention. Then she held up another, texts between them. You told me to sign off on Mom's accounts without telling her, she said, her voice calm but trembling. You said it was to keep things simple. But now I see you were trying to erase her before I even realized it. The judge nodded slowly. I've seen enough. The gavel didn't slam, it lowered, deliberate. Effective immediately. Financial access revoked, temporary protective order granted, investigation for elder abuse referred to state attorney. Julian tried to speak, but the judge cut him off. Your lucky criminal charges weren't filed today. I sat still, back straight, hands folded. I didn't gloat. I didn't cry. I simply turned to Rebecca, who reached for my hand. And in that courtroom, surrounded by facts and consequences, I felt something settle inside me. A peace I hadn't known in months. He tried to take my voice. But the law spoke louder. The house was quieter without him. Not just in sound, but in weight. The silence no longer felt watchful. It felt restful. Within a week, the bank froze all joint access to my accounts. Mr. Lerner helped me place everything into a legal trust under my name. No more forged signatures, no more backroom manipulation. My power of attorney? Rescinded and reassigned, this time, to Rebecca. But not without boundaries. We agreed on transparency, co-signature clauses, and a clause that allowed me to revoke it with one call. I trust you, I told her. But now we do things properly. She nodded. Yes, Mama. From now on, everything stays in the light. The house title was transferred back into my name. Turns out Julian had been attempting to move it into a shell company he controlled. Another trick, caught just in time. Rebecca filed for divorce 2 days after the hearing. I don't know how I didn't see it, she said through tears. I thought he was protecting us. You weren't blind, I told her. You were trying to believe in your marriage. That's not foolish, it's loyal. Her face softened, and for once, she didn't argue. Julian was legally barred from contacting me or coming near the house. APS followed through with their report. I didn't care about revenge, I cared about protection. He tried to have me committed. And now he was the one being watched. I returned to Dr. Patel's care, and within days of being off the sedatives for good, the fog lifted. I felt like myself again, steady, clear, present. I even started keeping a new journal. Not for evidence. For me. One evening, I stood in the doorway of my bedroom and looked around. Same curtains. Same dresser. But it no longer felt like a crime scene. It felt like mine. Later that week, I sat in that same room with a cup of chamomile tea, real tea, not one, accidentally, laced with anything, and listened to the wind against the windows. Outside, the garden was beginning to turn. Autumn, creeping in with its golds and rusts. Inside, I finally slept soundly. No creaking floors in the night. No second-guessing my memory. No waiting for footsteps at my door. Rebecca came by more often now, just her and the kids. No shadows hanging behind her. No pretending. The day the divorce papers were officially filed, she brought over lemon cake and sat with me in the kitchen. We didn't talk much. Just shared space. Safe space. You saved me, too, she whispered once. I didn't reply right away. But I reached across the table, took her hand in mine, and gave it a gentle squeeze. Because I knew what she meant. He tried to make me disappear. But instead, I reclaimed not just my voice, I reclaimed my family. 2 months later, my garden was in full bloom. Marigolds, lavender, and rosemary, scents that pulled memories from the soil. My mother used to say that a woman's peace lives in her garden. That no matter what happens inside the house, the dirt always tells the truth. She was right. The bench under the fig tree had become my favorite place. I would sit there every morning with tea, wrapped in my shawl, the air cool and forgiving. The same shawl I'd worn the night I overheard Julian's whisper. I still kept it, not as a wound, but a reminder. Myra came over for tea one afternoon, and we sat under the shade, watching the wind chase the petals. Well, she said, you handled that better than most attorneys I know. I laughed softly. I had a good coach. We toasted with mismatched mugs, one chipped, one stained, but both full. Rebecca came by later with the kids. They ran through the yard, chasing each other with bubbles and chalk-covered hands. She watched them, her expression quiet, a little tired, but lighter. He's been emailing, she said softly, eyes on the grass. Nothing aggressive, just trying to worm his way back in. I didn't have to ask how she felt. She answered anyway. I'm done looking back. I nodded, proud. She looked at me then. You're stronger than I ever knew. No, I said, brushing crumbs from my lap. I just stopped waiting for someone to save me. That night, after they left, I stayed in the garden longer than usual. The moon rose like a pearl in the sky. The wind carried the scent of rosemary through the air, sharp, cleansing. The house behind me was finally mine again. No ghosts. No games. Just me. And peace. I checked my email one last time before bed. A message from Mr. Lerner confirmed Julian's petition for asset mediation had been denied. He wouldn't see a cent. Not now. Not ever. There was no gloating in me. Only closure. Because this wasn't a story about revenge. It was a story about reclamation. About standing up before someone else could shut the door on your sanity. About showing the world, and your own daughter, that age doesn't equal invisibility. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to throw things or fall apart. All I needed was my memory. My proof. And a plan. They say elder women are easy to manipulate. They forget we've survived more than they can imagine. We've buried husbands, raised children, endured silence. But when the moment calls for it, we remember everything. And we write the ending ourselves.